Okay, AB Psychology. Today we're starting on Unit 4, Classical Conditioning. If you go to the website, theargenheimer.com, you go to the main website and it lands you here. And click on or hover over Psychology, then go down to Learning. And you'll get here where all the stuff is. You have the main lecture, which I was thinking about cutting the main lecture, but it wasn't quite introductory enough to learn it for the first time. It's more of a review, so I wanted to make this video. And then some other videos which I'll reference here as well. And then also a whole bunch of really good handouts and things. So first of all, the learning handout is useful to have for the whole unit and for today. And then we're going to be doing this worksheet, which will be attached. Both of these will be attached to the classroom post. And then I also have the Quizlet. But this worksheet right here will also be attached. But let's talk about Pavlov first. Okay, so you might have heard of Pavlovs Dog, maybe, maybe not. Here's the story of Pavlov's Dog, which is the birth of classical conditioning. So Pavlov was a scientist. He was not a psychologist. He was a medical researcher, and he was trying to measure the salivation response of dogs. So he had this dog. It looked like a German Shepherd. I don't quite. Well, it was a mutt of some sort, but looked kind of like this. And I was able to find this picture on Google Images. So here we are. It looked kind of like this dog, and he put a device. He basically drilled a hole in the dog's throat. Speaking of psychologists being nice to animals, he drilled a hole in the dog's throat, put a vial in the dog's throat, and it measured the salivation response of a dog. So dogs and humans both produce saliva as they anticipate digesting food. So he would give the dog food, and the dog would salivate in response to the food. That's exactly what you expected. You would do the same thing if we brought in pizza to the room. So give the dog food, dog salivates to the food. But then he noticed whenever he went into the room, the dog also salivated just to Pavlov entering the room, because the dog knew that food was about to come when Pavlov entered the room. So Pavlov thought to himself, is there anything he could do that completely unrelated to food, I guess like entering a room, that would make the dog salivate? So he wondered if he could do something like ringing a bell before giving the dog food, and eventually train the dog to salivate to the sound of the bell. So he did this over and over. He would enter the room, and then he would ring a bell, and then give the dog food, and the dog would salivate. Eventually, the dog started salivating. Pavlov would ring the bell, and the dog would salivate to the bell, of course, because the dog knew that food was coming after the bell. But Pavlov would ring the bell, and it would cause the dog to salivate. So this would be what he would later call a conditioned stimulus. Conditioned, like he conditioned the bell, he conditioned the dog to salivate to the sound of the bell, and the conditioned response to this new stimulus would be salivation just to the bell alone. So theoretically, he could ring the bell, not even give the dog food, and the dog would salivate. Of course, if he did that enough times, the dog would, what's called, extinguish the behavior, and the dog would stop salivating to the sound of the bell. But at least for a few times, a few days in a row, Pavlov could probably ring the bell, and the dog would salivate just to the bell, even absent the presence of food. So this all birthed what's called classical conditioning. And classical conditioning is made up of 5 parts. The unconditioned stimulus, which from now on will be abbreviated UCS. The unconditioned response, or UCR. The neutral stimulus, or NS. The conditioned stimulus, or CS. And the conditioned response, or CR. In the case of Pavlov's dog, in every case, the unconditioned stimulus is any kind of a stimulus or a thing that you do that causes an automatic response. So an unconditioned stimulus, in his case, first of all, think about what you think. What did Pavlov do to the dog that caused the dog to react in a way without any learning required? It was unconditioned or unlearned stimulus. It couldn't be the bell, because the bell had to be taught. But the dog doesn't have to be taught that the food causes salivation. It just does. And so that makes it the unconditioned stimulus. And then, what was the unconditioned or unlearned response of the dog from the food? And that would be salivation. The neutral stimulus is an object that is completely unrelated to the unconditioned stimulus, but can be paired. So the neutral stimulus is an unrelated object to the unconditioned stimulus, in this case food, that can be paired with the food to cause a similar response. And so in this case, of course, it is the bell. The conditioned stimulus is, I think, literally always the exact same thing as the neutral stimulus. It's just the conditioned stimulus is after it has been conditioned, and the neutral stimulus is before it's been conditioned. So the conditioned stimulus would also be bell. It's just the conditioned stimulus would be the bell after it's been conditioned to elicit a new response. And that new conditioned or learned response of the bell would be salivation. If you go back to the website, there are 3 videos showing this, and they're really good videos. So if you want to pause my video and watch, I guess 3, but the one you probably want to watch, most people have seen The Office. I don't want to play, I would, ideally I'd play all these 3 on video, but then YouTube would strike my video, and I don't want to do that. And then they'd take it off YouTube, so I can't do that. But they are all linked here. So if you pause my video, most of you have probably seen The Office. So there's an intro, one of the cold opens for The Office is when Jim conditions Dwight using an Altoid. So if you want to pause my video and watch this video real quick, go ahead and do that. But if not, I'll just kind of explain it. It's just a shame we can't watch it. But is that Jim keeps giving Dwight an Altoid. And then Dwight takes the Altoid. He gets some sarcastic comments, but gives the Altoid. But before Jim gives Dwight the Altoid... Oh, by the way, Jim references Pavlovs Dog before. He says he learned about it in school and he wanted to do the same thing to Dwight. But before Jim gives Dwight the Altoid every time, he plays this little, the Windows sound, like a PC sound. So then Dwight always subconsciously hears that sound before being given an Altoid. He does that over and over and over. And then eventually, Jim just plays the sound but does not give Dwight the Altoid. Dwight has a learned or conditioned response to the Windows sound. And then expects the Altoid physiologically, so he has like a bad taste in his mouth. So in that case, if we flip back to here, in that case with the Office open, the unconditioned stimulus, think about what it is. The unconditioned stimulus, what did Jim give to Dwight that had an automatic response? And that would be the Altoid. So that the unconditioned stimulus there would be the Altoid. The unconditioned or unlearned automatic response to the Altoid would be, I guess, salivation still, or expecting an Altoid handout, or, yeah, that would be it. The neutral stimulus in this case would be the Windows sound. That the neutral stimulus would mean before it's been conditioned to expect the Altoid. The conditioned stimulus would be the Windows sound after it's been conditioned to expect an Altoid. And the conditioned or learned response to the Windows sound would be expecting an Altoid and putting your hand out. And there's a few other videos. And I won't talk about these, but they are good to watch. Here's a guy that shoots his roommate. He does the Staples easy button and then shoots his roommate in college with an airsoft gun. It's good. There's a wee bit of swearing in it. And then this top one is fantastic because I feel like I do this to my brother. It's 2 brothers that are, the younger brother is annoying one of them in college by throwing paper at him. But both classical conditioning. Anyway, if you go to Classroom and open up the assignment for today, we'll kind of walk through a little bit of it. But you can also get it on the website. So here's the assignment for today. And it is 6 situations. So let's go over 2 together, and then you can do the other ones and turn that in. That'll be your assignment for the day. So number 1, when Mia gets back to the dormitory after jogging around the campus, he likes to take a quick shower before going to class. One morning, while taking a shower, he hears someone flushing a nearby toilet. Suddenly, extremely hot water comes rushing out of the shower head, and he experiences excruciating pain. After muttering a few obscenities, he continues showering. A few minutes later, he hears another toilet flush and leaps out of the shower. What is the unconditioned stimulus? So think about this story. The unconditioned stimulus is always a thing that is done, or an object that is given, that has an automatic response associated with it. You can think unconditioned or unlearned or learning not necessary stimulus. So what was done to Mia to make him react in an automatic way? And try and use the exact language in this story. So in this case, it would be hot water comes rushing out of the shower head. Because if hot water hits your body, you don't have to learn that that hurts. It just hurts. So that would be the unconditioned stimulus number 1 would be hot water. What was the unconditioned response to the hot water? and it says experiences excruciating pain and mutters obscenities. Then, what was the neutral stimulus, the unrelated thing that he learned to associate with the hot water? And that would be toilet flush. Toilet flush has nothing to do with the hot water unless you associate it. So the toilet flush was the neutral, and it became associated and became the conditioned stimulus. And then what was the new learned or conditioned response to the toilet flush? And that would be leap out of the shower. One more, and then I'll leave the rest to you. And this one's about carousel. Molly was ecstatic when she learned her family was going to the state fair next weekend. When her family arrived at the state fair, the temperature was in excess of 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But Molly didn't care because she was finally there. She stopped and watched some clowns performing next to the carousel. As she watched the silly antics of the clowns, with the carousel music playing in the background, Molly got more and more sweaty and uncomfortable. Eventually, she fainted from the heat. After that trip to the state fair, every time Molly hears carousel music, she feels a little dizzy. So here, what is the unconditioned or unlearned, no learning necessary stimulus? What happened to Molly that if it happened to you, you'd act in a similar way because you don't need to learn the reaction to the stimulus? And that would be the heat. So the heat is the unconditioned stimulus. What was the unconditioned or automatic response to the heat? The kind of two things. Molly got more sweaty and uncomfortable and fainted. So sweaty, uncomfortable, and fainting was the response initially to the heat. And then, what was the neutral stimulus which was associated with the heat? In this case, it would be carousel music. Nothing to do with heat, but she learns to associate it with heat. So carousel music is the neutral stimulus, which becomes the conditioned stimulus once her brain associates carousel music with the heat. And then what is the new learned or conditioned response to the carousel music? And that would be feels a little dizzy. So there are 4 more. Go ahead and fill out all those on the PDF, which is on Classroom. Turn that in, and that's